Would you stand now for our reading from the book of Ruth? We're continuing in our series entitled Relative Grace, looking at some of the persons who are listed as part of the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And here we have one of his great grandmothers. Hear now the word of the Lord. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Call me no longer Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So Naomi returned together with Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of Moab. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Friends, please join me in a spirit of prayer. Our gracious sovereign and our God, assist me to proclaim, to spread to all the world abroad the honors and glories of thy name. Amen. Can I get real with you for just a minute sometimes about how sermons get made? I was over at a friend's house this week, midweek, and they served me something I had never had before. It was amazing. Y'all are familiar with an ice cream called Bluebell, right? Y'all have heard of it? Do you know they have a peppermint bark Bluebell? Oh my goodness. It's good. And it reminded me kind of one of my favorite stories, a story I tell quite often about a young family that were dealing with some of the struggles and anxiety of times like these. There was a dad who was at home and found himself with some time on a Saturday, so he wanted to lounge. There was a mom who needed to go do a bunch of Christmas shopping, so she left him a long chore list. And guys, look up. If I'm talking about you or what you do, does anybody else procrastinate a little bit? All right? And so he's procrastinating. He's watching the game, and he's kind of looking after his daughter, but everything's really going well until he gets a call from his mother-in-law, and she's on her way over. And he looks at the stack of dishes that aren't done. He sees the disaster that through the week has become the living room, and he knows that he will be in trouble because she's going to tell his wife. And so he's trying to figure out what to do with his daughter while he gets after things. And so he puts her there in front of a TV, and she watches the show. And there in the room is a beautiful vase, and it's there. It's one of their prized possessions. It's from the old country. But there she's watching TV, and everything seems to be good. He's washing some dishes. He remembers he needs to check on her. And he looks, and he sees that she has a little piece of candy. You know, y'all have had little peppermint bark candy, right? And she's got that in her hands. And he's like, okay, be careful with that. Don't get it on anything. And everything keeps going well. And the next thing he hears is a little, Dad? Dad, okay, is everything okay? And she says, I'm stuck, right? And there she somehow had found her hand into that vase. Now, did I mention it was a vase from the old country? And it was a precious heirloom that they'd had in the family for many generations. It's not like a little glass vase like I'm using here. I'm doing this for the purpose of the illustration. So Dad's trying to figure out what he's going to do. And so he goes and he gets some Gojo. Does anybody know Gojo? It's a hand cleaner. And he goes and he rubs down her arm with Gojo on it, and it doesn't budge. It's stuck. And so then he goes and he gets some WD-40 and tries to squirt it, and it's stuck. And about that time, the doorbell goes off, and he realizes he's busted. And he decides he can't really hide it, so he goes and he opens the door, and his mother-in-law assesses the situation rather rapidly and sees what has happened. And there they talk through it all, and she listens to the little girl, and suddenly she says, honey child, are you still holding on to the candy? Yes. And she lets go, and the hand comes out. Of course, I used one large enough that I wouldn't look like a fool in front of all my friends, right? But the hand comes out, and the only damage to the vase was a little Gojo, some WD-40, and the stress of pulling on it. But I wonder if there might be things when we're going through this Christmas season with our family that we need to let go of. Are there ways of being, ways of acting, patterns that we've fallen into with those we love the most or who are closest to us that we need to let go of this time of year? We're looking at the book of Ruth as we kind of go through this series to talk about relative grace and to understand all these different stories that go into the family of Jesus. And the story of Ruth is so amazing. Just to let you know kind of what has happened in the story up to the point where we get to it today is that Ruth's husband and both of her sons have died while she is living in a foreign land over in Moab. And so now the only two people left with her are her daughter-in-laws. And will they take care of her and stay with her? Or what is going to happen? And so Ruth begins to try to think of and find a way to go back to her people to see what has happened. And that's where we get this beautiful story today. But I want to kind of walk you through like how she got over into Moab. Are you okay if I do a little more backstory on this? Right? She was married to a man named Elimelech. He is the one who has now passed away when they're in the foreign land. And Elimelech has an amazing name. Do the names sound like they're right to you? Elimelech's amazing name is God is my king. Isn't that a great name? I want y'all to name your next descendant. God is my king. It's awesome. I mean, there's no pressure in that name, right? Right? It's like naming somebody John Wesley, whatever, right? Or John Calvin, whatever. A beautiful, beautiful name. Naomi's name is pleasant or nice to be with. So imagine this. God is my king, Mary's nice to be with, and they move and settle in the land of plenty or fruitful. Epheth. These names are amazing. And so the expectation is that they would give birth to amazing kids, but their names, the boys' names, are Mahlon and Chilion, which means sickly and wasting. Friends, are you getting the math on this? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up. I mean, if Elimelech marries Naomi and it's multiplied by being in the fruitful land, it ought to equal bliss. Any engineers in the house that can help me with my algebra? I mean, if we have a situation where these two people are getting together, we expect amazing things from their family. But it doesn't equal wasting away and sickly. But that's what the story says happened. And it definitely doesn't equal the quote that Naomi gives to say, don't call me pleasant or happy anymore because my life is empty. Call me Mara, meaning bitterness and frustration. It doesn't add up. So what happened? I mean, where did it all go wrong? We're told that they're living in that land there in chapter 1, and what has happened is a famine has hit the land, and there's not enough food. And what happens when you're a person of power, of good family and good status, and you have means? When the world gets kind of dicey or tricky, do you wait around or go to God? No, you fix the problem, and so they did. They went away to Moab. Now, friends, Moab has its own backstory. How many of y'all have ever had a profile on Facebook? Anybody? Right? Any social media in the room? There's a relationship status you can do. You can say you're married, you're single, and they've got other things, but my favorite one was always, it's complicated. And if we're going to talk about the history of Moab and the people of God, friends, it's complicated. It gets kind of odd. I mean, in Deuteronomy, we're told that no person from the family of God is to allow any, and here, let me just pick it up, Deuteronomy 23, verse 3, no Ammonite or Moabite shall be admitted to the assembly of the Lord. Woo! Even to the 10th generation. None of their descendants shall be admitted to the assembly because they did not meet you with food and water on your journey out of Egypt. So they didn't help. It will go on and it will say in verse 6, you shall never promote their welfare or their prosperity as long as you live. Boom. I mean, what would get you so upset at people that nothing about them could be promoted for welfare or good being? Man, these people are separate. And yet we're told that the person whose name is God is my king. Did I mention he married a woman whose name was Pleasant? He left the land of bountiful and plenty and went over to these people. Friends, I haven't even brought up King Eglon from Judges and the horrible things he did when he was ruling over the people of God. They flat out don't like each other. But he had gone. And in that land, what had happened? They had met the most horrible of circumstances. But did you hear in that passage I just read about the story? There was something going on. It said when you came out of the Red Sea, when you kind of went up onto the land, they didn't meet you with food and didn't welcome you. It's reminding them of the story that although you are upset with the Ammonites and with the Moabites, that when you came out of the Red Sea on the way to the Promised Land, you passed through there. Did I mention it's complicated? And there on the highest point, Mount Nebo, Moses gets taken up there and shown by God the promised land. And there we have this beautiful passage that he says to the people. This is in Deuteronomy 29:10. It says, "You stand assembled today, all of you before the Lord your God, the leaders of your tribes, your elders and your officials, all the men of Israel, your children, your women, and the aliens who are in your camp, both those who cut your wood and those who draw your water, to enter into the covenant of the Lord your God." It's a place where the covenant of God is being made with God's people before they enter the Holy Land. And listen what this covenant is, sworn by an oath which the Lord your God is making with you today. It's God's side of the covenant, in order that he may establish you today as his people, and that he may be your God as he promised you, and as he swore to your ancestor, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. He is going to be their God so that they might be his people. All of that happens in Moab. The covenant is founded there. And there's a beautiful place on top of Mount Nebo that I went earlier this year, and I took a kind of panoramic picture of it that I hope you'll be able to see. And over to the left, I'm looking back. I'm sorry, let me just tell you first. I'm looking back toward the Holy Land from, well, it would still be called the Holy Land, but I'm in the Moabite kind of territory at the center of Moab, and I'm looking out toward Israel, and over on the left there, down at the kind of foot of that hill on the left, you can see just the tail end of the Dead Sea. And if you look over to the right, not on the mountain, but on that green out in the far distance, that's Jericho. And then you see there's this kind of green valley that goes kind of up from Jericho, tracing the center of the picture, and there in the distance would be Bethlehem, and on the very top of that, way out there, is Jerusalem. And God brought Moses up there to show him everything and explain the covenant that he was making with his people. Why would the person named God is my king head to Moab? Maybe when a famine hits, he was afraid and needed to be reminded of the divine actions of God. But there they had dwelled for these many years, and there he died. And now we get this tale of these two sisters. One professes openly a desire to love her mother-in-law from a different tribe and from a different people. She is unwilling to go back home. The other one, her name's Ruth, and the other one, whose name is Orpah, leaves. Now, the Bible doesn't really tell us what happens to Orpah, other than she kisses Naomi and departs. Tradition has been cruel. It literally says that her name means to be threshed by all the people who dominated her and took advantage of her when she left faithfulness behind. And the stories that are told are not good for her. But here you have two choices being made by these Moabite widowesses. And the other widowess does something that is so amazing that we read it today, so many thousands of years later. Here in Ruth chapter 1, down in verse 16. She said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge." And listen to what she says. "Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God." A widow enemy has the faithfulness that we should have expected from the man named God is my King. I mean, he should have known. He should have exhibited. He should have shown and demonstrated the kind of faithfulness that was not willing to be turned away. Friends, have you ever been around someone or had someone that you were loving through a difficult time, and what is their response? Leave me alone. Stop it. Quit following me. Quit helping me. But Ruth won't stop. Her faithfulness changes the world forever, and that anyone, anywhere, whatever your thoughts or beliefs, if you hold on to the promises of God and respond to the world in faithfulness, God will never let that faithfulness go. Somehow God meets us. You know, I wonder a little bit about that. Obviously, her faithfulness is amazing. It's something to be lifted up. Not knowing where they would get their meals, not knowing how they would live, going to a people who she had only met, the people who had left that land. She was willing to go. But friends, I don't think that's the whole story. I don't think the faithfulness of Ruth is the only reason she's in our Bible today. It's that somehow the faithfulness of a Moabitess widow is exceeded by God's faithfulness. And God does something more than we can possibly imagine. You see, God not only meets her faithfulness and leads her to Moab, allowing her life to be restored, her to be able to bear children and to have a whole family. It's that literally her great-grandson will be no other than King David, in whom and through whom the promise of God to redeem and save the world will be worked out in 14 more generations. Her faithfulness beyond her culture allows her to be a part of God's redeeming love for the world. I wonder what might happen to our faithfulness this Christmas if beyond our comfort and beyond those things we love and cherish, we let go and release what we try to hold on to. How might that free your family and reset the table? Every week we've been kind of going back to that place of the Christmas table where you might sit here in a week or two when you gather with family. And I wonder, is there anybody there who should know better? I mean, they have the right name and they have the right stuff and they've been given every opportunity, but they haven't lived in to who they were called to be. How will your faithfulness and love make a difference in their life? Maybe there's someone who has just had a tough time. Maybe like Orpha, they turned away from God and turned away from faithfulness, and the world feels like it has been a place of threshing their whole life long. How will your faithfulness bring grace to them and allow them a place to draw near and know they are safe and loved? Maybe there's a person there who's in hard times or difficult situations, or maybe it's the empty chairs for whom your life and history with them has been complicated. How will the redeeming grace of God that did not think it enough simply to restore Ruth to where she was before, but instead unleash the saving grace of a plan that before we ever knew we needed it was here so that each one of us might be loved into eternal possibilities of being children of God? Can we let go? Can we meet the challenges of life? They're going to come. But can we meet them with the faithfulness of God and know joy? Yes, today is still about joy. Not the kind of joy that is your joy face, not the kind of joy that's temporary, but the kind of joy that comes from following God in every situation so that the faithfulness of God might do something wonderful even in and with you. My friends, the question before us is that faithfulness is made known by love. How will you love? How will you love? How will you love? Amen.